What happens when a wife mistakes her husband's patience for weakness? I thought I could get away with one reckless night, just dancing, a little flirting, nothing serious. But when the photos surfaced and my husband stayed silent, I didn't realize silence could be the sound of legal preparation. I'm Lenora Vale, 32, and I know everyone thinks I'm the villain now. Maybe I am. But at the time, I just thought I was taking a little piece of my life back. I wasn't planning to ruin anything. I wasn't planning to lose my marriage, my home, or the man who used to look at me like I was his whole world. I just wanted to feel alive again. Daniel and I had been together for almost 10 years, and somewhere in all that time, I started to feel like a background character in my own story. He worked long hours, came home quiet and tired, and the house felt more like a waiting room than a home. We barely touched, barely talked, just existed side by side. I kept telling myself it was normal, that every couple hits this kind of lull, but deep down, I felt invisible. At first, I tried to fix it. I suggested trips, nights out, even silly games to make things fun again. He always said, maybe later, or we'll see after work. After a while, I stopped asking. I started dressing up for no reason, wearing lipstick to the grocery store just to see if anyone would notice. Sometimes they did, and that small flicker of attention felt like oxygen. Carla, my best friend from the salon, kept saying I was too young to live like an old married woman. She'd laugh and tell me I needed a night out, that Daniel had turned into a sweet but sleepy grandpa. I laughed too, but something inside me agreed. When I told Daniel Carla wanted me to join her at a new club downtown, he barely looked up from his laptop. He said, "Be careful," and went back to whatever spreadsheet he was working on. That was it. No jealousy, no questions, no spark. I told myself it was trust, but it felt like indifference. The kind of indifference that makes you start wondering if anyone would even notice if you disappeared for a night. I kept thinking, one evening of fun wouldn't destroy anything. It would just remind me that I still existed. Looking back, I see how foolish that sounds. But back then, I didn't. I thought I could control everything. The night, the story, the line between harmless and wrong. I thought I was still the one holding the pen. I was wrong. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The night before everything started, I stood in our kitchen staring at the clock while Daniel washed the dishes. The sound of running water filled the room, steady and patient, the way he always was. He asked if I could pass him the towel, and I did, but I didn't look at him. I was too busy thinking about how bored I felt. Not just that night, but in general. Every day felt like the same movie playing on repeat. He'd work, I'd work, we'd come home, talk about bills, eat dinner, watch something dull on TV, and go to bed. I used to love the quiet between us, but lately it just felt like a wall. When he finished, he sat down and opened his laptop. The blue light from the screen lit up his face. I asked what he was doing, already annoyed before he even answered. He said he was going through some financial spreadsheets for next month. I rolled my eyes, muttered that he always had work. He didn't respond. That annoyed me more. I told him he never wanted to do anything fun anymore, that we were too young to be this boring. He said I could go out if I wanted, that he didn't want to hold me back. That's when it started, this small flicker of resentment. He said it so easily, like it didn't matter what I did, like I didn't matter. I asked if it would bother him if I went dancing with my friends. He said, "No, as long as you're safe." He didn't even look up. I told him he could come with us. He said he'd rather stay home and rest. That calm tone of his, that steady, careful voice, it used to make me feel safe. Now it made me feel invisible. At work the next day, I told Carla about the conversation. She laughed and said I was married to the most boring man alive. I told her not to say that, but I couldn't help laughing too. She said I needed to wake up, and remember who I was before Daniel turned me into a houseplant. She said, "Come with me Friday. You deserve one night where you're not somebody's wife or mother, just you." I told her I'd think about it, but deep down I already knew I'd go. That evening, Daniel was home early for once. He'd cooked dinner, something simple, spaghetti and salad. He tried to make conversation about Owen's school project and my week at the salon, but I gave short answers. I was thinking about Friday night, about the dress hanging in my closet that I hadn't worn since before our wedding. He noticed my distance, of course. He always noticed things. He asked if something was wrong. I said no. He didn't push. After dinner, I was scrolling through my phone when a text popped up from Carla. "Friday's on. Wear something dangerous." I smiled without meaning to. Daniel looked over from the couch and asked who it was. I said it was just Carla, making plans for the weekend. He nodded, but I saw the flicker of something in his eyes. I asked what that look was for. He said nothing, just that he hoped I'd be careful if I was going out late. I told him not to worry so much, that I could handle myself. He smiled a little and said, "I know." That was all. Later, when I went upstairs, he was still at the table with his laptop open. I paused in the doorway, watching him. His focus was calm, deliberate. On the corner of the screen, I caught a glimpse of a calendar entry. Downtown, 10:15. I didn't know what it meant, but it felt strange. Daniel wasn't the type to make personal reminders. I almost asked about it, but decided not to. I told myself he was just organizing his work schedule, like always. Before bed, I asked if he wanted to watch something together. He said maybe tomorrow. He looked tired, older somehow. I went upstairs alone and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I didn't look like someone who was about to make a terrible mistake. I looked like someone tired of being ignored. That's how I justified it. When Daniel finally came up, he kissed my forehead and said goodnight. I pretended to be asleep. As he turned off the lamp, I heard him move something in the drawer beside the bed, a faint sound of paper sliding. I almost asked what it was, but I stayed quiet. He got into bed, turned his back, and within minutes, his breathing evened out. I lay there, staring into the dark, my phone lighting up with a new message from Carla. Friday 9 p.m. "Don't back out," I typed back. "Wouldn't dream of it." The screen went black, and the silence in the room felt heavier than ever. A moment later, I heard Daniel's laptop click shut downstairs, a soft but final sound that somehow made my chest tighten. It was just a normal night. At least, that's what I told myself then. Friday night came faster than I expected. I told Daniel I was heading out with Carla and some of the girls from the salon. Nothing fancy, just a little dancing. He asked what time I'd be back. I said not too late. He nodded, the same calm nod that always made me feel like he wasn't really listening. Before I left, I noticed he was sitting on the couch with a folder open, a pen in his hand. He was writing something, slow and neat. I asked if he was working again, half teasing. He said he was just getting organized. That word, organized, stuck in my head, though I didn't know why. I wore a short red dress I hadn't touched in years, the kind that made me feel young again. Carla honked from outside, yelling that I looked finally alive. In the car, she sprayed perfume at me, loud music filling the air, the kind that makes you forget who you are for a little while. She told me I deserved to have fun, that Daniel was lucky I hadn't left him already. I laughed, but it came out too sharp. The club was packed, lights flashing, music pounding, people pressed shoulder to shoulder. I hadn't been out like that in years. Carla introduced me to a few people she knew, mostly men who smiled too wide and called me trouble. I pretended not to like it, but inside, I did. Every look felt like proof I still mattered. Then I met Miles. He was behind the bar, confident, charming, with that lazy grin men like him always have. When I ordered a drink, he leaned closer and said, "You look like someone who doesn't come here often." I told him he was right. He said that was a shame. Carla dragged me to the dance floor after that. The music was so loud it drowned out my thoughts. I laughed and spun and forgot how quiet my house always was. At some point, Miles came around the bar and joined us. He didn't ask. He just started dancing beside me, close but not touching, like a test. It should have made me uncomfortable. It didn't. It made me feel noticed. I told myself it was innocent. Just dancing. Everyone dances. But then his hand brushed my arm, and I didn't move away. I even smiled. Carla noticed and gave me a look, half teasing, half proud. Finally, she mouthed over the music. I shook my head, pretending to protest, but I didn't stop. For a moment, I let myself believe it didn't mean anything. Then, out of nowhere, I saw it. A bright white flash from someone's phone. A camera. I didn't think much of it until I noticed the stranger who'd taken it smirking at his screen. I told myself he wasn't taking a picture of me, but my stomach said otherwise. I tried to forget it, but the image burned into my head. Miles leaned closer, asked if I wanted to step out for air. I nodded, needing to breathe. We walked to the patio outside, the cool night a relief after all the heat and noise. He lit a cigarette, offered me one. I said no. He asked if my husband minded me going out like this. I told him my husband trusted me. He said, then he's a lucky man. For a second, I almost believed him. When I checked my phone, I saw a message from Daniel. Everything okay? I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I locked the screen and slipped the phone into my purse. Miles asked if I wanted another drink. I said maybe later. He smiled, said, I'll be waiting. Inside, Carla waved from the dance floor, laughing. I tried to relax again, to shake off the guilt creeping up my neck. But every time I glanced around, I imagined people watching, judging. I told myself I was just being paranoid. Still, when we left the club around 2 a.m, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Carla dropped me off at home, the street quiet, except for the hum of distant traffic. The porch light was still on. Daniel always left it on when I went out, even back when things were good. I stood there a moment, staring at it, feeling both guilty and annoyed. Inside, the house was dark except for a faint glow coming from the hallway. His work light. I tiptoed upstairs, changed quietly, and slid into bed. Daniel's side was empty. He'd fallen asleep on the couch again. For some reason, that hurt more than if he'd been angry. I told myself I hadn't done anything wrong, that it was just dancing, that he didn't even care enough to ask how the night went. When I reached for my phone to plug it in, I noticed a notification. Someone had tagged me in a photo. My heart dropped. It was from the club. Me, in that red dress, smiling with Miles beside me, his hand too close on my waist. The caption read, Friday Flames. I untagged it immediately, but it had already been up for hours. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound of Daniel's footsteps on the stairs, but the house stayed silent. Then, just as I started to drift off, I heard the faint buzz of my phone, a message preview lighting up the dark. We need to talk. I didn't reply to his message right away. I told myself it could wait until morning, that I was too tired to argue. But deep down, I knew sleep wasn't coming. I kept checking my phone every few minutes, watching that unread text glow like a warning. When I finally drifted off, I dreamt of the club again. Lights flashing, people staring, Miles's hand on my waist, and a camera flashing in my face. The next morning, Daniel was already up. He was sitting at the kitchen table, his coffee untouched, his phone face down beside him. He said good morning, quiet but polite, the kind of voice people use when they're holding something back. I said it back like nothing was wrong. Then he asked how my night was. I said it was fine, just dancing, nothing crazy. He nodded slowly, then turned his phone over. The screen showed a picture. That picture. Me in the red dress, smiling like I didn't have a care in the world, Miles's hand resting on my waist. I felt the blood rush to my face. I told him it was just a photo, that people always take things out of context. He said he wasn't angry, he just wanted to understand. That calm tone again, it made me defensive. I told him he was overreacting, that everyone dances at clubs. He said maybe, but not everyone looks like they're enjoying it that much. I laughed, told him he was being dramatic. He didn't laugh back, he just said, "You don't have to lie, Lenora." That line cut deep, maybe because it wasn't shouted. It was quiet, too sure. I told him I didn't lie, that he always twisted things to make me feel guilty. He said, "You don't need my help for that." Then he stood up, carried his cup to the sink, and washed it as if nothing had happened. I sat there speechless, humiliated by his calmness. When I got to the salon, Carla was already waiting with coffee. She said the photo looked amazing, that I shouldn't care what anyone thought. "You looked alive," she said. "That's what matters." I tried to believe her, but halfway through the day, I noticed two of the younger stylists whispering near the back. One of them had the photo open on her phone. When I walked past, they went silent. My hands shook as I folded towels, pretending not to notice. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I texted Daniel to ask if he was coming home for dinner. He didn't reply for nearly an hour. When he did, he said he had to stay late at work. That was unusual. He always let me know ahead of time. I tried calling, but he didn't answer. Something about the silence made me angry. I started convincing myself he was punishing me, that he wanted me to feel small. When I finally got home, his truck was already in the driveway. Inside, the lights were dim. He was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, calm as ever. He asked if I had a good day. I said I didn't want to talk about it. He said that was fine, but he wanted to make something clear, that he wouldn't be made a fool of. I snapped, saying he was acting paranoid, that I hadn't done anything. He said, "I didn't say you did." Then he stood, picked up his jacket, and said he was going for a drive. The sound of the door closing was louder than I expected. I paced the room for a while, angry at him for walking away, angry at myself for caring. I told myself he was trying to control me, that he always wanted me to feel guilty for wanting attention. I even called Carla to vent, and she said he was just trying to make me beg. But when I hung up, the silence in the house felt heavy, like something waiting to collapse. The next morning, Daniel was gone before sunrise. He'd left a note on the counter, taking Owen to school, back later. I didn't know whether to be relieved or worried. When I went to make coffee, I noticed his laptop open on the table again. I didn't mean to look, but my eyes caught a spreadsheet, names, dates, small notes beside each. At the top, it said, household. I didn't understand it, but something about it felt deliberate, like he was keeping track of everything. At work, Carla told me to let things cool down, that men always come around once they realize they can't control you. But I couldn't shake the image of that spreadsheet. It felt like a list of receipts, though for what, I didn't know. That night, when Daniel got home, he didn't bring up the photo. He just sat across from me at dinner, eating quietly. I wanted to say something, to break the silence, but every word felt dangerous. After we cleaned up, he picked up his phone, stepped outside, and took a call. I could see him through the kitchen window, talking low, serious, writing something down. When he came back in, he said he was tired and went straight to the guest room. I stood there in the hallway, frozen, watching the light under the door fade. I told myself he was just cooling off, that we'd talk in the morning. But part of me already knew we wouldn't. Just before I went upstairs, my phone buzzed again, a notification from someone I didn't know. Another tagged post from the club, same night, different angle. This one showed me laughing while Miles leaned in close. I untagged it instantly, my heart pounding. Then I looked toward the guest room and saw the faint glow of Daniel's phone light under the door. He was awake. The weekend came, and everything between us turned into polite silence. Daniel didn't raise his voice, didn't accuse, didn't even look at me with anger anymore. It was worse than if he had. He just moved through the house like someone crossing a bridge that was already collapsing. Saturday morning, his mother Tess called, inviting us to a family barbecue. I said we were busy, but Daniel said we'd go. His voice was calm, final, like it wasn't even a question. When we arrived, everyone was already there. His brothers, their wives, cousins, all smiling until they saw me. I could feel the tension under the greetings, the fake warmth in their hugs. Tess gave me a long look before saying, "You look rested." I smiled too wide and said, "Trying to." Daniel helped set the table, talking easily with his family, like everything was normal. I wanted him to show some sign, to pull me aside and say we'd be okay, but he didn't. He just kept smiling that quiet, unreadable smile. During lunch, the conversation circled around work, kids, vacations. Then one of his cousins joked that social media was dangerous these days, especially for married people who forget they're being watched. Everyone laughed except Daniel and me. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. I looked at him, waiting for him to defend me, but he just said nothing, passing the salad bowl calmly. Tess's eyes flicked between us, sharp as glass. I excused myself a few minutes later, pretending to take a call, even though my hands were shaking too much to hold the phone steady. Outside by the garden, Tess followed me. She didn't yell, didn't accuse. She just said quietly, "Daniel deserves peace, Lenora. You might want to think about what that means." I told her she didn't know what went on between us. She nodded, said, "I don't have to." Then she turned and walked back inside, leaving me standing there with my chest burning. I hated how calm everyone was, how no one was yelling, no one giving me a chance to fight. I could handle anger, but not this cold quiet. On the drive home, I tried to break the silence. I said I didn't appreciate being judged by his family. Daniel said they weren't judging me. They were reacting to what they saw. I asked if he told them. He said no, they didn't need details. I snapped, saying he was letting them think the worst of me. He said, "They don't have to think it, Lenora. They saw it." The words landed like stones. I said it was just a photo, just one stupid night. He said, "It's never just one night. It's every choice before it." When we got home, he took Owen to his room to play, while I sat on the couch, shaking. I told myself I was the one being wronged, that Daniel had turned his family against me. I texted Carla, told her I was done being made into the villain. She replied, "They're just jealous. Don't let them see you break." I wanted to believe her, but something in me knew she didn't really understand. She didn't have a husband quietly building a case with every breath. Sunday morning, I took Owen to the park. He was running toward the swings, laughing, when he stopped suddenly and asked if Daddy was mad at me. I said of course not, that grown-ups just argue sometimes. He frowned and said, "Grandma said Daddy's heart is tired." I froze, my throat tight. I told him Grandma worries too much. He shrugged and ran off, but the words stayed lodged in my chest. When we got back, Daniel was sitting at the dining table again, laptop open. He looked up and smiled at Owen, but didn't look at me. I noticed folders stacked neatly beside him again, this time labeled with dates. My stomach twisted. I asked what he was doing. He said, "Just sorting things out." I tried to laugh, asked if he was turning into an accountant now. He didn't answer. I stood there waiting for him to look up, to argue, to do something that felt like the man I knew. But he just clicked something on the screen, calm as ever. That night, I tried to make peace. I cooked his favorite meal, lit candles, even put on that red dress again, trying to remind him of how things used to be. He came home late, glanced at the table and said he'd already eaten. I said we needed to talk. He nodded, sat down and waited. I started explaining, fast, trying to fill the silence, how it was just dancing, how people blew things up online, how he knew I'd never actually do anything worse. He listened quietly, then said, "You want me to tell you it doesn't matter, but it does." I asked if he was done punishing me. He said he wasn't punishing me at all. "I'm just getting ready," he said. I asked, "For what?" He said nothing, stood up, and started stacking the plates I'd set. I grabbed his arm, but he pulled gently away. "You'll understand soon," he said. After he went upstairs, I stood there alone in the candlelight, trying to steady my breath. From the hallway, I heard the soft click of a door closing, then the faint sound of paper sliding again. I told myself it was nothing, just Daniel, always organizing. But deep down, I knew something was being built quietly around me, something that would soon fall. The next week, the house felt like a stage set. Everything looked normal. Coffee brewing, laundry folded, Owen laughing in the background, but nothing sounded right. Daniel and I spoke only in small, careful sentences, the kind you use when you don't want to start a fire. Every night, he worked in the living room with his folders, typing quietly, while I sat upstairs pretending to read. Sometimes I'd catch him printing things late, the sound sharp and steady like a heartbeat. I'd tell myself it was for work, but the neat labels, household, expenses, custody, told me otherwise. One night, I tried to bring it up. I asked if we were okay. He said yes, of course. I asked if he was angry. He said, no, just making plans. He didn't elaborate, just kept typing. That was worse than yelling. I stood there watching him, arms crossed, waiting for him to ask me to sit, to fix things, to fight for us. He didn't. I said it felt like he was punishing me. He said, "I'm preparing." I asked, "For what?" He only replied, "For peace." That word unsettled me more than anything else. Peace. It sounded too final. The next day at the salon, Carla noticed I was quiet. She asked what was wrong, and I told her Daniel had been acting strange, cold, distant, secretive. She said maybe he was finally realizing he couldn't control me. I laughed, but it didn't sound right. I said he wasn't angry, just calm, too calm. She told me to relax, that men always act strong before they fold. "He'll come around," she said. But that night when I came home, Daniel wasn't there. On the counter sat a note, picked Owen up early, back after dinner. When they got home, Owen ran straight to me, excited about some game they'd played at the park. Daniel just smiled faintly and went upstairs without a word. I could hear drawers opening, the soft thud of boxes being moved. My heart pounded, imagining suitcases packed quietly. But when I went up later, the closet looked the same. Everything perfectly in place, except for one new folder on the desk labeled Household 2. That weekend, I tried to pull him back in. I suggested we take a family drive, go for lunch somewhere nice. He agreed, which almost felt like relief, but the car ride was silent. I pointed out funny billboards, made jokes. Owen laughed, but Daniel didn't. At the restaurant, he ordered coffee and said he wasn't hungry. I told him he could at least pretend to enjoy himself. He said, "I'm done pretending." Then he smiled, softly, sadly, and turned to help Owen cut his food. After we got home, I followed him out to the balcony. The sun was setting, the air heavy with that golden stillness that makes everything look like it's holding its breath. I asked what he meant earlier, about pretending. He said he'd been pretending things could go back to normal, but he knew now they couldn't. I tried to interrupt, to explain, but he kept talking, his voice calm, almost gentle. "You think this is about a picture," he said, "but it's not. It's about respect. Once that breaks, you can't fix it with dinner or words." I told him he was being dramatic, that he was throwing away years of marriage over something small. He said, "It's not small to me." I turned it around like always, told him he wasn't perfect either, that I'd felt invisible for years, that maybe if he'd shown me more affection, none of this would have happened. He just nodded and said, "I know you believe that." The way he said it, quiet, certain, made my chest tighten. I told him I wasn't the only one to blame. He didn't argue, he just said, "I'll handle it properly." I laughed out loud. "Handle it properly? What are you, a lawyer now?" I said it to hurt him, to make him react, but he didn't. He just turned his eyes toward the fading sky and said, "No, just a man who's done trying to win arguments." He went back inside, leaving me there with my pulse thudding in my ears. The air felt heavier after he left, like the night itself knew what was coming. I stayed out there for a long time, staring at the lights across the neighborhood, thinking about how calm he'd been. Too calm. Later that night, when I went to bed, I noticed his pillow was gone. The sheets were smooth, untouched. I walked downstairs and found him asleep on the couch, one arm across his chest, the other resting near a folder on the coffee table. I wanted to wake him, to ask what he was doing, to demand the version of him that used to care. But I didn't. I just stood there watching him breathe, still and steady, while the sound of the clock ticked beside us. I told myself he was bluffing, that he'd never actually leave, that men like him always cooled off eventually. I went back upstairs, whispering the same lies I'd been telling myself for weeks. But just as I reached the landing, I heard his voice from below, quiet, almost to himself. "It's time." Then the soft click of a drawer closing followed, final and deliberate, echoing through the dark. He texted me the next morning saying he wanted to meet downtown at 10. No explanation, no tone to guess from. I told myself it was finally time for us to talk, maybe start over. I put on a white blouse, something soft and calm, like peace could be worn if you chose the right color. I even did my makeup carefully, the way he used to like it. In the car, I practiced what I'd say, that we both made mistakes, that Owen needed us together, that it was time to move on from the past. When I reached downtown, he was standing outside the courthouse steps, hands in his pockets, looking so composed it scared me. He didn't look angry. He didn't even look sad. He just looked sure. I smiled, trying to break the ice, asked if we were here to sign something for the house or taxes. He said, "Not exactly," and nodded toward the lobby doors. I followed, still convinced this was about reconciliation, not realization. Inside, the air smelled of paper and cleaning spray. A clerk at a desk looked up when we entered, already holding an envelope. Daniel didn't speak. The clerk said my name, then placed the envelope in my hands. I thought it was a mistake until I saw the seal, my name typed neatly across the top. I opened it slowly, my fingers trembling. Petition for dissolution of marriage. My breath caught, another page slipped free, a custody proposal. My vision blurred, the letters swimming. I looked up at Daniel, certain this was some kind of joke. I said we could fix this, that I'd been trying. He said he knew. I told him we could go to counseling, take a break, anything but this. He said, "You made your choices. I'm just finishing them properly." His voice was quiet, respectful, almost kind. That kindness made it worse. People passed by, brushing my shoulder, their footsteps echoing through the marble hall. My throat tightened. I asked if he really wanted to end everything over one photo. He said, "It was never about the photo, Lenora." I asked if he hated me. He shook his head. "No, I'm done feeling anything at all." Then he nodded to the clerk, thanked her, and turned toward the exit. I stood there, frozen, the envelope shaking in my hands. I called after him, said this wasn't fair, that he couldn't just walk away like that. He paused at the door, looked back once and said, "Fairness is exactly what this is." Then he walked out into the sunlight, disappearing into the crowd. For a moment, I couldn't move. The lobby felt too bright, too quiet. Somewhere nearby, a phone camera flashed, and I saw the light catch my reflection in the glass. My face pale, eyes wide, mouth half open. That's how it ended. One photo of me standing there, clutching the papers that spelled out everything I'd lost, while Daniel walked calmly into the day like he'd been planning it all along. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching,